Hello everybody and welcome. It's Morgana here with a special 2-for-1 video for you today. Today I'm going to be reviewing some wonderful new watercolour paper I've recently been given and doing a short demonstration using it as well. So this is my paper. This is the brand ARCHES or ARCHES, a couple of different pronunciations there. As I understand that it's a French company, a French maker of paper, I will be using the French pronunciation today, which is ARCHES. If anyone would like to correct me, please feel free to do so in the comments. But I was very lucky to be given this recently as a gift, and I'm really excited to crack it open and start using it. So it's a mid-size pad, I would say. It's 9 inches by 12 inches size, or 23 centimeters by 31. And as you can see, it's the pad itself is portrait orientation, but of course it's just paper. You can use it for portrait or landscape work. The only difference, I believe, is that it's gummed along that sort of short top edge there. But it's 100% pure cotton paper. This pad in particular has 12 sheets and the weight is 140 pounds, which is the same as the paper that I am accustomed to using. However, this is a rough textured pad, which is something that's brand new to me. I usually use hot press or cold press watercolour paper, and so this is a much more heavily textured paper than I'm accustomed to, so I'm really excited to try it out. I believe the ARCHES brand also does do cold pressed and hot pressed pads. You can see here that lovely sort of rough, bumpy texture on the paper that's going to be really interesting to use. I'm going to try some dry brush techniques, which I'm really hoping that this lovely rough paper will pick up really nicely. Just so as not to extend this video too much, I'm going to try and do a simple marshland or lakeland scene. As you can see, 12 sheets, 100% cotton. This is the good stuff, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm really excited to give it a go. So I've taken a sheet off the pad and I've taped it down as I normally would to my board. Got it sitting at a slight angle, roughly 45 degrees. I've just popped my colours in the on screen there. I will of course put a full description of everything I'm using today in the description below the video. And now all I'm just doing is I'm going to give the top 2/3 of the paper a nice bit of water and let that soak in for a minute, get that top part nice and wet. So that's going to be our sky, which I'm going to paint using wet in wet technique. So now I've just let the water soak in for a minute or two just to get that paper really nice and saturated. And I'm just dabbing in a little bit of alizarin crimson to begin with, which is going to give us a really nice subtle glow in the sky. Don't worry, it's not going to stay that strong. We're not doing a sunset scene. It's going to diffuse out beautifully into the other colours that I'm putting on now, which is Payne's Grey and some ultramarine blue as well. And as you can see, I'm beginning with a really diluted down, watered down colour, mixed with plenty of water. So I'm adding even more water onto the paper as I put my paint on, keeping it nice and wet so that paint can start to move around. You can see already I'm getting some really lovely diffusion between the colours on this wet paper. It's all sort of blending and working together really nicely so far. And so I'm just building up the darks in this painting a little bit, just getting a little bit of more texture and movement. I'm trying to leave a lighter patch in the centre and leave a little bit of that lovely alizarin crimson peeping through as well. That's going to give us a really nice glow in the sky. You can see is even as I'm painting here, the paint that I've put on in sort of stripes, horizontal stripes, has already softened and diffused into this lovely sky without any sort of hard brush lines or patches. You could probably go in and blend that even further, but I'm actually really happy with how this looks so far. All I'm doing now is using a damp brush to take out the excess water that's run down and beaded along that bottom line. It's a really nice, quick, simple way of pulling out the water without having to faff around with, tissue or kitchen towel or anything absorbent. And now that I've removed most of the water that could potentially run back and cause a mess or cause some cauliflowers, I'm actually going to put in a distant tree line using dark paint, thicker, darker paint. This is Payne's Grey that I'm using at the moment, and my Estrada Ultimo synthetic mop brush to just dab it in along that bottom line. And you can see while because the paint is still lovely and wet, it's running back up into the sky, and we're starting to get those soft, diffused little blooms of colour going up into the sky there, which you can just encourage just by pulling the paint up a little further, and you get that impression of a distant sort of misty tree line in the background. And now I'm just beginning to dab in a little bit of alizarin crimson into this tree line as well. I'm trying not to go in too heavily with it, so just little dabs of colour along that tree line, just over and amongst the Payne's Grey, nice thick, rich paint. And that's going to start diffusing upwards as well into the skyline and give us little pops and little interesting hints, little motes of colour along that tree line, which is going to slightly echo as well that lovely soft glow that we've managed to maintain in the sky from that really, really diluted alizarin crimson as well. So I'm just going to let that diffuse upwards into the sky, and you can actually encourage this process by turning your board upside down and letting gravity do the hard work for you. And you can see already, I think you can see the paint starting to move on that lovely wet paper, and just giving us that lovely sort of raggedy, natural looking tree line. This is what it looks like, and now it's dry, it's all lovely and dry and set, that paint. Really, really pleased with how that tree line's come out, those lovely misty distant trees, those lovely colours. So now I'm just starting the dry brush. And so I'm going in with my little 1-inch brush here, and just going along the foreground with a mixture of some Payne's Grey and ultramarine blue mixed so that it's really, really light. You can see how easily it's going on. I just use a light touch and just going over that lovely sort of rich, crunkly texture of the rough grain paper. It's actually giving us this really lovely bright sparkle of the sun on the water. I'm actually leaving that patch in the middle almost completely white because that's underneath where we've got that pale patch in the sky. That's going to be reflecting that lovely glow. I really want to maintain lots of lovely bright sparkle in the water in the foreground of this painting. So I'm just going to start building up a little bit of detail, putting in a little bit of land here, really nice and easy to do with a flat brush. Just dab in a lovely straight line with a little bit of detail. And I'm using Payne's Grey again just to give us a nice bold bit of foreground. And as you can see, it's really lovely and simple to do these horizontal sort of strips of loose foreground with the flat brush. It does half the work for you. All you need is a steady hand-ish. Mine is steady-ish. But that's not doing too badly for a wobbly hand. And with these sorts of things, sometimes the wobblier the better. So again, I'm just going to dab in a little bit of alizarin crimson into this Payne's grey and just continue that colour harmony throughout the painting. Again, trying not to go too overboard with this rich and striking colour, and just popping in a few sort of bits and bobs as necessary. You just want those little hints, those little pops of colour. Then we've got the foreground there echoing that distant tree line, which in turn is echoing that lovely sky glow. And a nice harmonious painting. And so I'm just doing the same on the other side here on the left, again dabbing in some little bright spots of the alizarin crimson and just using it to begin building a little bit of shape, a little bit of body into these delicate sort of spits of land that I've got coming in from the side here. And I'm also going to put a little bit of darkness right in the foreground, so I'm just sweeping over with my brush here, just get a little bit more texture in. Using the Payne's grey to just darken down a little bit this lovely sparkling water. And I've mixed up some Payne's grey with a little alizarin crimson again to echo the colours that are already there, and I'm just dabbing it in really lightly to begin with along the foreground here. So again, I'm just using the small brush to begin building up just a little bit of loose, interesting structure in this bit of foreground here. And again, the alizarin crimson and the Payne's grey reflecting the colours we already have, working really nicely together. And now all I'm doing here is beginning to add a little bit of grass sort of detail and texture into the foreground. I'm using my sword liner brush, but any liner brush or a rigger brush or anything that comes to a sharp point here would be really good. Or of course you can carry on using the little brush, like a small round brush or a small flat brush, anything to just give a little bit of shape and a little bit of definition and start bringing some sort of nice natural sort of grassy texture into these little spits of foreground. And as you can see, all I'm doing is just going along and using the fine point of the brush to just build up this lovely loose, sort of spiky, rough looking textured grass. Nothing too delicate or dainty about this. All you need is a fine brush and some enthusiasm. So now I'm just going to add in a little more foreground. I decided that it looked a tad lopsided with just that heavy dark line along the left and on the bottom, so I've just gone in and used exactly the same process to add a little more foreground into the picture. And now I'm just going to put in a little bit of really simple detail. I'm going to pop in a sunken fence using the flat brush, and you can see just how quickly and easily you can put in some loose, sort of raggedy looking fence posts just by dipping that flat brush into the paint and just using that sharp chisel edge to just build up some really nice straight lines. It's honestly as simple as that. You've got yourself a lovely little sunken fence. I'm just going to use my sharp pointed brush to just draw a little bit of perhaps tangled rope or wire drifting between those old fence posts there. And of course, now we've added that sort of sharper human touch, the fence posts, we must pop their reflections into the water as well. You can see I'm just using my little round brush here and just using the same colour as the post, just slightly diluted, and just giving them a little wiggly reflection, just pulling the brush down the paper. Again, this lovely rough textured paper is helping the line not to look too sharp or too severe. Of course, because it's in the water, so it's not going to be a straight mirror reflection. We have to account for sort of the texture, the ripples, the movement in the water. So I always like to do a nice wobbly fence reflection. Now, I can never resist doing a big sky scene like this without adding in a few birds. Birds always completely optional as usual, but for me, this lovely lake scene was screaming out for some geese. So that's what I'm popping in. I'm using a really fine brush and some Payne's Grey just to get the little goose shape in at first. I'm going to do a stain of them flying across the sky. I'm using a miniature brush. I think the size is 3/0, so it's really nice and fine. And for a really simple sort of flying water bird silhouette, all you need to do is that slightly wonky wobbly line in the horizontal, and then a pair of triangles for the wings, either facing up or facing down, depending on where you want your wing position to be. That's the simple secret to easy geese. So as you can see, I'm just basically moving from left to right across the paper, scattering birds as I go. At this point I am rather winging it, if you'll pardon the pun, with my bird placement. I'm sort of just doing it by eye, and judging where they look like they should be. You know, there's nothing more technical than that. However, if you are somebody who likes to be a little bit more careful with the placement of things like this, a really great technique is if you have a piece of tracing paper or anything thin or see-through, a piece of acetate perhaps would serve just as well. You quickly sort of draw out your these shapes, and then you can sort of hold them over your painting to see where they look like they would fit best in terms of composition before you actually go ahead and paint them in. But that's, even as I discussed, probably the best technique for doing this. Here I am just sort of bobbing along and doing my own thing as always. But there we go. I'm just going to add one more low-flying fellow just here on the left. And now you can just leave it at that, just these lovely decent silhouette, but I've decided to add a little bit of opaque white gouache, or you can use just an opaque white watercolour paint, such as zinc white, I believe, or titanium white are both opaque, if memory serves correctly. And just go in with your really, really fine brush and just do some little white detail, a little stroke of paint on the wings, and I've decided to put a little white ring or collar on the neck of the bird, which is to me speaks of Canada geese, those wonderful migrants that we have in and around the UK, especially right now. As I'm speaking, it's autumn. We get the migration of many, many birds in and around the coast where I live, and the Canada geese are always a majestic sight as they fly over and create an awful lot of noise and fuss as they do. So for me, these are Canada geese. But to you, they may be something else. I'd love to hear in the comments if there's anything you think they look more like, or if there's anything that you'd like me to demonstrate in terms of sort of migrating birds and that sort of thing. So here we have the finished painting. Just trying to show you a nice close-up so you can see the texture of that lovely arch paper. I really enjoyed using it today. It's my first time. It absorbed the water and the paint really quite well, more than I was expecting. I had to use more water than I normally would, I think probably due to how the paper is sized. So there's a tip for you folks. If you haven't tried this paper yet, be sure to use plenty of water. The finish, it dries really nice and matte. The colour's clean and bright, and as you can see, I was able to very quickly put together a nice loose landscape painting. In terms of the dry brush ability, I was really impressed. Even my slightly wonky dry brush, it made look good. So that's something I need to work on. I think my dry brushing technique needs a little extra work, but still I'm really happy with how this came out. As a first go for this paper, I must say I'm really impressed, and I can't wait to get through the rest of the sheets in this little pad. If you do have any questions about this video, please feel free to drop them in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. A huge thank you, as always, to my wonderful Patreon members who help to keep this channel running. You're all wonderful people. And if you're so inclined to join up with my Patreon page, the link is in the video description below. But thank you all again once more for watching. Hope you have a lovely rest of the day, whatever you're up to, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon in the next video.